that Hazel embraces, because I think it says a lot about them as characters, and it also says a lot about the rest of us and what's important and how we organize our lives, which is really what I want to talk about, because I think it's the most interesting thing that we do as people, is make choices about how we're going to organize our lives. But the thing that I want to say at the outset before I talk about the book is that although it often does not feel this way, you choose every moment of your life what to think about. So every moment of your life that you're thinking about, you know, John and Kate +8, you're making a choice to think about that. Every moment of your life that you think about Jessica Alba, or you think about, you know, the quality of Justin Timberlake's romantic relationships or anything like that, you're making that choice. And every moment that you think about astrophysics, you're choosing to think about astrophysics. Every single moment of your life, although it often does not feel this way, you are choosing where you focus your attention. And what you choose to focus your attention on is extremely important, because you're going to die. And not only are you going to die, everyone you know and love is going to die, and all of their descendants will die, and there will come a time when there are no human beings to remember that any of us ever did anything. And so any attempt, any idea that you have in your mind that you're going to live your life for some posterity, for some eternality, for some that somehow something that you're going to do in your life will result in your immortality, is wrongly based on the idea that the sun is not going to explode. That's very, very important, because a lot of the way that I think we orient our lives is toward this idea of leaving a legacy, or making a sacrifice, or doing something that will result in our being remembered forever. As if the idea of forever is not extremely problematic. Like, whenever we think about that stuff, we never think about how incredibly problematic the idea of forever is. And so that's that's the first thing that I want to say as background. So Gus gives Hazel this video game novelization that she actually turns out to like. It's a pretty good video game novelization, as video game novelizations go. You know, it's about this guy, Staff Sergeant Max Mayhem, who's always going to war and making wonderful sacrifices on behalf of his team, but then, of course, at the end, he miraculously survives anyway. And that, I mean, first-person shooter video games are in many ways like the contemporary epics of our culture. So where the Greeks had the Odyssey, and where you know, where Shakespearean age had Romeo and Juliet, our epic, tragic, you know, story is the story of the guy who goes to war and has to make terrible sacrifices in order to save his buddies and or his country. And so when we indulge that fantasy, which I think, by the way, is like totally healthy, and I don't have a problem with it, and I play first-person shooter games, we are buying into a very specific idea of what constitutes heroism and what constitutes like a well-lived life. That the best thing that you can do in this world is a grand, romantic gesture, even if it kills you, that it's worth it to do this big, huge, romantic gesture. And our epics have always told us that, right? Like, Odysseus comes home after like all this time on the road, and he gets back home. For those of you who don't know, I'm talking about this old Greek poem. You don't actually need to know anything about it in order for me to understand the rest of what I'm going to say, but you should read it, it's good. So Odysseus comes home, and like, he's been gone for a long, long time. And he comes home and his wife has some suitors who are like hanging out at the house and like eating his food and stealing his money and everything. And he's angry, as anyone would be, but, and then the rivers run with blood because he kills all of them. And that's like the great story of, that's the great epic, that is essentially boiled down the great epic story of antiquity. There's this guy, he fights very heroically in a war, it takes him a very long time to get home. When he does, he kills all of his wife's suitors, and they live happily ever after. Well, that's an extremely inappropriate response to returning home and finding that, like, you've been gone for many, many years, and your wife has some suitors. Of course she does. You know, like, there wasn't like a way to like send a telegram or a text message saying, Odysseus here, I'm fine, it's gonna be a while. She thought he was dead, and she had every reason to think that he was dead, and if anything, she should have married one of those guys, and he should have killed all the other suitors. And like, or if you look at the epic story of Romeo and Juliet, you again see a grand gesture. You see a star-crossed love story that's played out not on a small screen, but on the biggest possible screen. This big screen of, like, you know, family strife. And it's always about politics or war or these big families who don't love each other or whatever it is. It's never about the thing that circumscribes almost all of our lives, which is disease. Or the thing that limits us in every way, every single day of our lives. Like every time we wash our hands, we're doing that because, well, which you should do. We're doing that because we're afraid of disease. Like, you know, thousands and thousands of times a day, we circumscribe our behavior because we are aware that there is this thing that haunts us and will eventually come and get us and kill us. But we don't make our romantic epics about it because there's nothing glorious about dying or being sick from disease. There's nothing like romantic, capital R romantic, about that. And I wanted to try to write a story that was capital R romantic, that was about the thing that limits almost all of our lives, which is not like whether or not we're going to jump on this grenade to save our buddies, but how we are going to find little ways in our lives to be meaningful to the other people who are here with us now, and little ways to be kind to them and to try to protect the people who are here now and the people who will come after us as best we can. And I want to speak very briefly before I bring up my brother to talk more about heroism, about, I don't know where he is, about my, sort of how this book came to be. I worked for about 5 months in 2000, so 12 years ago, as a chaplain, a student chaplain at a children's hospital in Ohio. And while I was doing that work, I learned a couple of things. The first thing was that I did not want to become an ordained minister, which was important. And then the second thing was that I really, really wanted to write a story that was about the kinds of sick kids I was meeting at the hospital, which is to say that I was not meeting kids who were tragic cases. I was meeting kids, thank you, Elise, who were humans. And who were quite a lot like any of the other teenagers that I hang out with. That sounded creepy. So the image of the person suffering from cancer, not just children, but particularly children, is that they are these sad, wise-eyed creatures who know the secret to the meaning of life because they've been forced to stare deeply into the abyss, and they've come back and they have some kind of knowledge that is not available to the rest of us. Well, that's not true. And I wanted to write a story that was really, really funny in the same way that the kids I knew were really, really funny, and that found a way to be unsentimental in the way that the kids I knew were unsentimental, and angry in the way that they were angry, and that wouldn't, you know, like all of the kids that I knew who had cancer were super conscious of the cancer kid cliches, and while, you know, some of them applied, others of them didn't, and they, you know, that tension was always really interesting to me. But for the first 8 years that I tried to write this story, I failed miserably, partly because there was this dashingly handsome hospital chaplain character in all of my stories, who was also an alcoholic and was like trying to manage his drinking while also seducing this gorgeous young doctor. It was like a terrible Grey's Anatomy. And I wasn't able to really find a way into the story until I met Esther Earl, a young nerd fighter and reader of my books who had terminal cancer. And when I met her, although I didn't know it at the time, and then over the course of the next 3 years, you know, I grew to know her and be very good friends with her, and be close to a lot of her closest friends in our community. And it wasn't so much Esther's illness that was an inspiration to me, it was Esther's empathy. I think what I needed was to meet an empathetic teenager. I say that lovingly. I was not an empathetic teenager. It's very, very difficult to imagine what it's like to be other people, but it's particularly difficult when you are only beginning to understand and imagine what it's like to be yourself. And in Esther, I met a really empathetic teenager, and I also met someone who did not take to any of the cliches of young cancer survivors, including, by the way, the phrase cancer survivor. And you know, Esther's empathy and her sense of humor and her you know, fear and all of that became very close to me because because she and I were close to each other. I want to make it very clear that Hazel, the girl in the book, is not Esther, and I want to make that particularly clear since Esther is not here to defend herself against, you know, horrible accusations like that she enjoys America's Next Top Model. But there is no way that I ever could have written this story without Esther, and her legacy is so strong in our community, and that's one of the reasons that tonight you can donate to The Star Won't Go Out, and up to $500 your donations will be matched by Hank and myself, and you guys have a lot to live up to because in New York and Boston they raised more than $2,400. So, no pressure. So I want to talk more about heroism and video games and the desire that we all have to be remembered. But unfortunately, I feel that that would best be done in the form of song. And many of you may know that I am not a very good singer. You don't have to say "aw," it's a fact. So it is now my pleasure to bring to the stage the founding editor of EcoGeek, the world's most famous environmental technology website. He is the creator of the Project for Awesome, YouTube's annual charity event. The co-founder of DFTBA Records. He is a Billboard charting artist. And in 1998, his classmates at Winter Park High School voted him Best Dancer. Ladies and gentlemen,